Welcome back, Wagoneers, to another top 5 in no particular order. We're going to continue on the sports theme. We've already did our top 5 favorite MLB players for our respective teams. And today we're going to do top 5 NFL players for our respective teams. So, who would like to take us away?
I'll start. My list is pretty short. I'm going with the Saints here. That's my favorite NFL team. My list comprises of one honorable mention here. It's going to be Lance Moore, wide receiver for the Saints.
He's a handsome specimen.
He's a handsome specimen. He was an artist making those difficult catches for Drew. And, he was big in Super Bowl years. Just a tool that we had that really made some great catches at the time. So, yeah.
Some of the best celebration dances.
Oh, yeah. Celebration
the dance he did in Minnesota.
One against the Vikings.
Yes.
Like, when he's
all
like
time.
doing this shit and whatever, and he's like, yeah, over there.
Yeah, the dude was very, very in sync with his dance moves.
Very in sync. Very, very. And you still catch him. He comments on, I think, Fox 8 or something like that.
It's tearing up my heart when I'm with you.
So, Lance Moore, honorable mention.
Then we are
Number 5
Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
is going to be Devery Henderson.
Okay. Why is that?
Deep
LSU?
Devery.
Deep throat Devery?
New Orleans own Devery Henderson.
He was that one guy that, he was nowhere to be found, and all of a sudden he's catching the ball 40 yards away and makes the touchdown. He was, man.
He always ran the reverses very well.
He was.
Because he was lightning.
He was lightning. He was definitely lightning. Next one on the list, Cam Jordan. He's a good player. He's grown with the team.
He's a good dude, too.
He's a good dude. His personality is, awesome. I love seeing every year his new look. I think I've seen some kind of meme or something of how he's changed through the years. And he looks like a completely different person every year, every season. But he's good at what he does, and he's been doing it consistently for a long time.
I will say something about Cam Jordan before you move on. Yeah. He is Camden's favorite player and probably in Saints history. And he actually went to Airline. He actually went to Camden school. Visited with kids, and he did a trivia question, and Camden answered the question right, so he got assigned a team book, or what's it called? What they give out? Program. He got assigned a team program because he answered the question right, and there was a picture of it on the school website. It was like holding Camden's hand up. Camden looked completely elated, like it made his day. So Camden's a good dude, man.
Yeah, awesome dude.
Cam, good.
Number 3 on the list, it's going to be the Deuce McAllister.
Deuce is loose.
The Deuce is loose.
Steady dose of deuce.
Man, watching him play was a marvel. It was just great. I've seen so many plays of 4 and 5 guys on top of this dude, and he keeps running towards the end zone, and you cannot stop Deuce. He's a tank. And back then, we had Reggie Bush and all those speedsters, and they would run out to the outside all the time and do those fancy.
Deuce was a north-south runner.
Do those fancy plays and all that. But you give it to Deuce, he's going to run up the middle, and he's going to get you that yardage every single freaking time.
He was 6'1", 250 pounds. He was a little bit oversized for a running back.
And it never looked like he was running fast, but when he broke away, he was always running away from people.
Yeah.
And I think what I liked the most about Deuce was, when we drafted him, everybody said, why are we drafting Deuce McAllister when we have Ricky Williams? And I think it became at that point everybody was just done waiting for Ricky to develop into what everybody thought he was going to do and just ready to see what Deuce could do. And then Deuce just quickly overtook Ricky Williams. So
Yeah, and he's also a good dude. Another good dude. I've ran into him before, and he at rouses and stuff, and he's like, hey, how you doing? That kind of stuff.
Well, he gives
Very
analysis on
friendly
Fox and
guy.
stuff, the local news.
He does excellent analysis with
He doesn't sugarcoat
Yeah, he's no Ben McDonald, but he's a great commentator.
Yeah, he really is. So, another good dude.
No
All right, number 2 on the list of my favorite players for the Saints is the great Drew Brees.
This is Ted Henderson.
Over Tom Brady? No way.
This is kind of odd for Mike, being that it's his number 2 Saints player, but we just had a debate with he and his wife where he's very much pro Tom Brady, when his wife is very much pro Drew Brees. So it's kind of a surprise that you see him this high on your list.
Yeah, now, look, as much shit talking that I do with my wife about Drew Brees, he has been our best by far quarterback that we've ever had. He's really good. If it wouldn't have been, for Tom Brady being, the athlete that he was, Drew Brees could have easily been, top of the charts of everything. But unfortunately, Tom Brady just, hung in there longer and, won all these Super Bowls and all around the same time as Drew Brees. So Drew doesn't get the recognition that he deserves. But as far as a Saints player, he is number 2. Another good dude, and I stand behind what he does. Charity work and just giving back to the community. He's opening up.
I like all his restaurants.
Yeah, all these restaurants and stuff that but that's also giving back to the
I still
community.
haven't been to Small Sliders, but
Hey, walk-ons.
Walk-ons.
Walk-ons
They're
is
doing pickle and pins. That's his.
yep.
All those things.
Well, Surge already was taking the place of Surge with the pickle and pins thing.
And my number 1 Saints player of all time is
Taysom Hill.
that's right, Taysom Hill.
Is it because he looks good, or is it?
He's well, that too. He's a very
It's a
handsome.
plus.
He's a very handsome specimen. But he does it all, man. He can throw the ball, he can
Swiss
catch the
Army knife.
ball, he can run the ball. Like there's nothing he can't do. And for that, he's my number 1. And he's
Drew was
another
on
great
some-
dude.
Drew Brees was on some radio show recently, like the last week, and he said that Taysom Hill needs to touch the ball 10 to 12 times a game.
Absolutely,
Minimum.
absolutely. So
Like Drew's got faith in Taysom.
I saw some statistic that when Taysom touches the ball more, we end up winning.
Yeah.
So,
There was a bunch of people who would say, "Oh, well, he needs to be our next starting quarterback" and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, he's not a starting quarterback.
No, he's
but
not. But he's a winner.
I do like it when they situationally put him at quarterback. I think that is when you throw the defensive ball. He does have an arm on him, and he can complete some bombs. But I think when you saw him even in preseason and the games that he filled in when Breeze got hurt, his completion percentages wasn't there.
Yeah.
That being said, I love the guy. I think he's a real asset to our team.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can put him in anywhere, and he's gonna overachieve for sure.
And my mom really likes Taysom Hill. Me and Travis have a running joke with her, like every time he touches the ball, we're like, "Mom, did you check out Taysom's glutes when he was running?" And she kind of laughs at it now. So it's kind of a running joke in our household. Every time Taysom touches the ball, we turn to our mom and say, "Mom, did you see his glutes pounding?"
While she's making the meat pie.
She hasn't made us those crawfish pies yet.
Crawfish pie. That was like a year ago now, huh?
Yeah, it was one of our first episodes. So who wants to go next? That's a good top 5, Mike.
I'll jump right in. I mean, my favorite team is also the Saints, obviously being from New Orleans. I'm going to start. I kind of like a pre-honorable mention, and he's currently on the team, and he's a Mississippi State Bulldog. And I don't have many. I only have one defensive player on my list. So I'm going to throw Jonathan Abram out there. He's a Mississippi State Bulldog. Very, very talented first-round pick for the Raiders, and never really panned out. Hard hitter. I love his attitude. And the I don't know how many games he started last year, but one of the games he started last year, he had one of the best games of his career. And I really think if you continually push him and give him that time to play, you may see more results like that. Don't know what the long-term picture of him for him is, so I'm just kind of throwing him out there as like a pre-honorable mention. Hopefully he ends up getting a lot more playing time this year and earning a more permanent roster spot on the team, but I guess this season will only tell how long he's going to stay on the team. First honorable mention, I'm going to say Drew Brees. I'm not including him in my top 5 because I just feel like he's too obvious of a pick.
It's not obscure enough.
He's not obscure enough for me and Travis's taste. I have his Super Bowl bobblehead in my man cave. I have a nice little sketch by a New Orleans artist named John Griami of him after the Super Bowl when he was a kid. I loved him when he was drafted out of Purdue. I thought he was going to have a really great career, and he had a couple of good seasons in San Diego, but it wasn't quite what he had in New Orleans. And of course, when we signed him, I was a little bit skeptical with him coming off the shoulder injury. But man, I'm glad we did because I think as Saints fans, we really can't take Drew for granted, man. Like, I don't know if we're ever going to see another quarterback the caliber of Drew Brees in our franchise. I mean, won us our first Super Bowl, came very close to getting to one or two other Super Bowls. And again, the whole community outreach that he has was starting all these projects like the Surge and the Pickles and Pins, and of course all the restaurants he's opened.
The Breeze Foundation, whatever they call it.
And like Mike said, he's generally a good dude. Camden had played, and I actually coached in the FNA Flag Football League that he got running down here. I'd see him a few times and wave to him and say, "Hey, what's up, Drew?" And he'd say, "Hey, what's up, man?" Back. A good dude, and I don't think, like I said, I don't think we're ever going to see another quarterback like Drew Brees again. It's probably going to be more old and shriveled up. Next honorable mention, where did my notes go? Jimmy Graham. And honestly, if he would have stayed on the Saints longer, he may be in my top 5. There's no doubt in my mind, had he stayed on the Saints, stayed with Drew Brees, he would be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Him going to the Seahawks was probably the worst thing for his career. Even when he went to the Seahawks, I thought it was going to be a good move for him. I still thought he was going to continue to have great seasons. Not quite as good as he would with Drew Brees, but it just didn't really work out. And I thought kind of found it comical when he came back to the Saints. Every time he came in the damn game, he had a touchdown. I just thought if he would have stayed on the Saints, of course, Hall of Fame numbers, and probably would have made my top 5. But I think the thing I didn't like the most about that was he kind of bitched and whined and wanted to be paid like a wide receiver, and that kind of, I think because of all that, he wasn't working as hard, and we moved him out. But Jimmy Graham's my second honorable mention. My last honorable mention, I'm going to get to Steve Gleason. And of course, Steve Gleason was never really a position player. He was a special teams ace. He was a special teams captain. Of course, he was the whole focal point of the New Orleans rebirth. We got the statue in front of the Superdome for that. And it's sad to say he has the ALS now, and there's a whole bunch of foundations now for that, and a whole lot of money towards ALS research. But one thing that makes him one of my favorite players is that me, Travis, and Mark Barbe would go to Saints camp every year to go watch the mini camps. And 2 or 3 years in a row, him and Mel Mitchell, the backup counterpart with him, would come to our side where we stood first, and they would sign autographs, and they would just shoot the shit with you. He was just a really, really down-to-earth dude. We saw him at Jazz Fest. I think I may have mentioned this story on the pod before. We saw him at Jazz Fest one year. He walks past us with a fucking case of Miller Lite over his shoulder. And back then, the dude, before his ALS, he was just playing. This dude was fucking huge. So you see the guy, and you walk up, it's a pretty distinctive look. It's like, holy shit, it's Steve Gleason. But then we watched the documentary on, I I think it was the Prime documentary where his wife's talking about how much he loved music festivals. And I was like, well, yeah, no shit. We saw him at fucking Jazz Fest with that case of Miller Lite. But he's my last honorable mention. I mean, and it's not necessarily because of his play on the field, but it's more so because those years when we were at the Saints camp and he actually would come and talk to the fans.
I had that
Yeah,
2002.
exactly. Sean has with us
hanging
one
out
year.
with the signatures, and I had Mel Mitchell and Steve Gleason both signed on that thing.
That was one of the years we went. And him and Mel Mitchell came and talked to us and shot the shit with us for 5 minutes and then moved on to the next people. Good dude. Moving into my top five, my fifth favorite Saint of all time is going to be my first favorite Saint ever when I was a kid. And it's largely because we talked in the last episode about collecting sports memorabilia and figures. And one of the first Saints starting lineup figures that came out was Eric Martin, wide receiver for the Saints, and he was the all-time leading receiver in Saints history before Joe Horn broke it, and that was preceded by Marcus Colson. So he's probably third on the all-time Saints receivers now. But he was he's a staple in my childhood. One of the main reasons why I started liking the Saints, and Eric Martin's going to come in at my number 5 top Saints buckers. Fourth is Willie Snead. And I think Willie Snead, one of these guys, what really drew me to Willie Snead, and Travis mentioned this earlier when we were talking about preseason, watching preseason games. And the main reason why we would watch preseason games, I mean, obviously you're not going to watch it for the quality of football that's being presented, but you're looking and hoping, you're basically watching for these young guys that are really battling for a roster spot. And what really drew me to Willie Snead was that the dude never dropped anything. I remember the first year he was in camp, I was like, I haven't seen this dude drop a pass all year. Then there was this one play where he gets hit up the middle and the ball falls out of his hands. I'm like, oh, he dropped one. Then he falls to the ground, the ball falls right in his hands. I'm like, nope, he didn't drop it. The dude had really good hands. And I know, he's another guy, much like Jimmy Graham, that I feel like had he not moved on to another team, where would he be in the Saints receiving history? He had the 2 DUIs that really kind of kicked him off the team. Or I think that kind of forced Peyton to kind of push him to the back of the receiving corps. But had he stayed as our number 2, number 3 receiver, you would have probably seen him climb up the all-time receiving list too. Really reliable set of hands. Another guy, you mentioned that you met Deuce in person. Travis and I met Willie Snead in person at Verizon Wireless. This was shortly after the whole DUI incident. Signed autographs. Good dude to shoot the kids. Still have his jersey. Don't wear it too much anymore because, I don't know, I think he's obviously going to be known more as a Saint than anybody else, but maybe when he retires, that jersey will become more of a frequent wear. 3 for me. This is kind of an odd pick because it's an offensive lineman, but as you know, I'm kind of a Wisconsin guy, and that's Ryan Ramczyk. I think he's been a reliable Saints offensive lineman for a staple on the offensive line for the past couple of years. I mean, it kind of sucks that right now it seems like he's done for the year, and his career might be done too. I don't know how many times he made Pro Bowl. He's a perennial Pro Bowler. I think he's going to go down as one of the best Saints offensive linemen of all time. He's right up there. He may not make the Hall of Fame, but he's kind of right underneath the Willie Roaf and the Teron Armstead caliber guys. They're really reliable, and up until recently, a pretty durable offensive lineman too. Because I remember when we drafted him, he was kind of criticized for being injury prone, and to have that mark on him when he was drafted and to kind of last as long as he did, I think that kind of says something about the guy's level of play. So he's my number 3 pick. And my number 2 was Mike's only honorable mention. That's Lance. And it goes...
That's your number 1?
He's my number 2.
Number 2.
It goes beyond the fact that he had those great end zone celebrations. He was a very, very handsome young man.
He was a stud.
But what really made me a fan of Lance Moore, he was always one of these guys, much like Willie Snead, who kind of just kept hanging on the roster for years. Then all of a sudden, I don't remember who our wide receivers were at the time. It might have been like Devery Henderson and somebody else who was in front of him. Well, they were both hurt. So me and Travis make a move in fantasy, like, well, Lance Moore's the next guy in line. Let's pick him up. And the dude had a huge season that year when we picked him up. So I always have a special place in my heart for picking up Lance Moore at that time and him producing those good numbers. And of course, Drew Brees can almost make anybody look good, but Lance Moore, again, much like Willie Snead, had a really, really solid set of hands. Super Bowl, we won the Super Bowl without that clutch 2-point conversion, you call it. I have that picture. I actually got that picture signed. It's hanging on the wall in the man cave. You signing autographs at Hooters. I have the picture where he's ripping that ball and putting it over the end zone line. Really reliable set of hands, great dance moves, best in zone celebrations. A really, really good receiver for the Saints. That's more than number 2. And my number 1 is Deuce McAllister. I mean, it's the first Saints jersey I ever owned. And I'm going to be honest with you, when the Saints drafted him, much like Travis said, I was kind of like, why the hell are we drafting this guy? We have Ricky Williams. I'm a Mississippi State guy. Fred Smoot was coming out that year, and we needed a cornerback. And I was like, why the hell are we not picking Fred Smoot? Why are we picking Deuce McAllister? But man, you watch this guy run, and it's like it didn't seem like Ricky Williams was even a threat to him. You know, it's like he wanted that job, and every time you gave him the ball, he gained yards. Even when he was stuffed at the line, he would fall forward and gain yards. And like I said, it didn't seem like he was incredibly fast, but when he broke away, he just pulled away from people. And I had a poster hanging on my wall that was like kind of like, you know how like Playboy had like the centerfolds? ESPN magazine had those same things too, where it was like a poster of like a specific player each week, and I had his poster from ESPN magazine hanging on my wall, and one of the that was on the poster kind of sticks with me. And he's like, and it said, "I'm like a Mercedes, I ride smooth and easy." And when you watch the dude run, that's how it was. But he tore away from people. And as far as like the autograph signings that I went to of all the Saints players, Deuce was by far probably the most genuine dude I've ever met. And we met him at the Walmart on Chapatoulas, probably one person in line in front of us. And you know, he's sitting in the alcohol section, and Travis pushes the picture in front of him, and it's like an angry picture where he's sitting on the bench, and he's like, "Oh man, you brought the Angry Deuce picture. I'm gonna take a picture of that." And he did. He posted it on Twitter, like Angry Deuce. Dude was just cool shit. And much like you said, as far as like his commentary, he's not quite Ben McDonald level, but he's pretty good.
Very good.
Again, I think it goes back mainly to the fact that the dude is a genuine guy. I wish he didn't have the two knee injuries. I think his career, he could have been he is one of the all-time greats for the Saints, but he may have been, you know, NFL Hall of Fame caliber had he stayed healthy. And one thing I want to say before I close out on Deuce, I'm still waiting for his fucking name to be put in the Saints Ring of Honor. I don't know why it's not in there yet. You know, he's, in my opinion, the best running back in Saints history.
He's also probably one of the most charitable local, in terms of local in the community, with his time and his money. Okay, he's always doing like autograph signings somewhere.
Yeah.
Be it for Crown Royal, which he's an ambassador for, but just doing signings in general. Like, what other player, past or present, has done more signings than he's done in the last 30 years?
Yep.
And he's been retired for a long, long time.
And I think when I did the NFL, we already did the top 5 NFL favorite players, and he was at the top of that list too.
Where did you go to college?
I know. Ole Miss, which was another reason why I didn't want them to draft him. But it's kind of, isn't that ironic though, that an Ole Miss college player is one of my favorite Saints players of all time?
Hey, one of my favorite NFL players went to Tennessee, and it's just a thing.
Like I said, I didn't even want the Saints to draft him. I wanted the Saints to draft Fred Smoot because I felt like he was the best cornerback coming out of that draft. He was from Mississippi State. I was all in on him, and they passed on him for Deuce. I was kind of pissed. But you watch Deuce run, and it's just he changed my opinion on him.
I'll go next, and I'm gonna kind of put a curveball to this because I'm not going to pick the Saints as my favorite team. We were talking about before, and Sean knows this. I was a Rams fan for the longest time, and still not really sort of am, but growing up, I followed the Rams more because my favorite player of all time in the NFL played for the Rams, and he's also a local to New Orleans. But if you'll,
Carver High School.
yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 2 top 5 lists. I'm going to mention 5 players on one team, but I'm going to really make the focus of my list the guy that's on the honorable mention because he's so important on and off the field that I want to do 2 lists. So I'm just going to run through my top 5 Saints players, just get this out the way. In fact, number 5 is Joe Horn. Number 4 is Pat Swilling. I got to meet him. He lived in Eastover Country Club where my dad worked, and I worked for a little while, so I got to meet him a few times. Number 3 is Colston. Number 2 is Deuce. Number 1 is Breeze. Nothing really to say about that. We can all figure out why those might be my top 5. The reason I want to do the Saints one was for the honorable mention of Steve Gleason. One, for what obviously he did after Katrina and the statue, and we already talked about how important he was to the Saints coming back home after Katrina like that. But I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times at his charity kickball tournament and playing in that. And his wife would bring him out to watch us play. Even if he was only there for maybe like an hour, we got to take photos with him, and we all got fist bumps from him. But we would play the Gleason tournament every year for a number of years, and that was just a really cool event for a good cause. And the fact that he would actually come out and just, even if it was only for like 20, 30 minutes, to just watch us play was really, really special to me. So I will forever have a place for him, for me, on a personal level. So my other impromptu top 5, I'm only doing because of Steve Gleason. To my actual 5, I'm taking the Rams. I'm going to be pretty quick with these. 2 honorable mentions, Steven Jackson and London Fletcher. My number 5 is Jerome Bettis. My number 4 is Kurt Warner.
Yeah.
My number 3 is Isaac Bruce. My number 2 is Eric Dickerson. And my number 1 is my favorite football player of all time. It's Marshall Faulk.
No real elaboration on him.
Not really need to. I don't want to get into like too much time and talking about it because I did like a whole nother top 5 per se. But I mean, Kurt Warner's story is one for the ages. Faulk's my favorite player. Eric Dickerson was a top 5-10 running back. All the accolades, right? Isaac Bruce is one of the best receivers on that Greatest Show on Earth team with Kurt and Torrey Holt and Asa Keene, which also had Ricky Prohl and Aeneas Williams on it like that. London Fletcher was just a really great player. Steve Jackson, kind of like Deuce, had injuries that kind of cut his career a little short, but he was a great back for the team for a while.
He was shredded, too.
He was also shredded. And, so my top 5 is pretty.
So those little teeny mate figures that you probably see scattered around here that are only like this big. The new football line decided to do throwback players for each team, and Carson got a pack, and one of the ones that he ended up getting was a Redskins throwback London Fletcher, which I thought was pretty damn cool.
And
Was he on the Redskins before the Rams? Or
I
after?
think he's after. I think he ended with the Redskins.
And yeah, kind of like Ty was saying, he didn't want Deuce because he went to Ole Miss. Where's Steven Jackson play? Did he go to Georgia? Or was that Todd?
Oregon State?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, Todd Gurley got some thoughts about him, but he also went to Georgia. So I understand pulling for a rival of your college team, but good player. Can't make big bones about it.
Hey, you want to go? You want me to?
No.
You want to go?
Oh, I can go. I mean, it's interesting. Well, you said Kurt Warner is one of my all-time favorite players, and biased that the American underdog too many football movies that well, but I'd say if y'all haven't seen that one, it's pretty good because it focuses more on like his journey to the NFL more than his life in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of like his arena league team. I mean, his arena league journey, and you know, getting with his wife, and you know, taking in his wife's kids, and one of the kids has like autism or whatever, and like taking the kid into like his own. You know, pretty heartfelt story, all that kind of thing. Yeah, it's funny you said Dickerson because yes, huh? What? Because funny you said Eric Dickerson because I'll go with the Colts as my favorite team, even though yes, of course I like the Saints, and I don't know if I don't know if I had to pick a favorite Saints player, it would be up there from I don't know. Thing from like Cam Jordan to Unger to I'm trying to think of the jerseys in my closet. Jonathan Doma, Colston, people longer in my top 5. But anyway, it's funny that I started making this list of Colts players, and of course it's obviously from a certain era when they were decent. It's not the Peyton Manning era, but I really did like the Colts a lot during that time and a little bit after in the Andrew Luck era. I still kind of like, watch them sort of like, hope they do well, whatever. It's not like I'm a who they have kind of thing, I did like when they Gardner Minshew was their quarterback last year, Not that I hate Anthony Richardson or anything, but, it was, when it was easy to get behind them last year, they were made off the thing, didn't they? Mm-hmm. So I have way too many players on this, so I don't even know where to start with honorable mentions. So it's almost like it's in like categories. I'll get like an O lineman and defensive player out the way. Art Glenn from the O line, and then Gary Brackett was linebacker from the defense. Those are some very obscure ones there. So let me throw those out on honorable mentions. Yeah. For some reason, that's.
I mean, I'm not opposed to anything obscure.
They're names that I remember more from Madden, if anything. Gary Brackett was like my dude I'd use on Madden, get all the sacks and shit like that.
If those are an honorable mention and Bob Sanders is not in your honorable mention, we're gonna fight.
Bob Sanders is not on that list. I respect the dude. It's just he was always hurt. I mean, I liked him. He came back that Super Bowl year in 2006 and helped them win the Super Bowl with the dude. He was never really one of my favorite players on the Colts. And so then running backs of saying like Eric Dickerson, yes, like Eric Dickerson, I have a Rams jersey and I have a Colts jersey by him in the club. Aside from Marshall Faulk or even Edgerrin James, as much as like Edgerrin James, I'd have to say Colts running back, I'd have to pick Joseph Adai. So what's it? That's everything from he went to LSU, fantasy wise. I had him on a fantasy team a couple of times, I think, and did well.
Do you remember Chris Berman's nickname or play name whenever he would score a touchdown?
Joseph Live and Let Die.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's the only LSU thing I had in my house is an LSU Joseph Adai McFarland figure. We were talking about that. It's hanging on the wall. I mean, in my man cave there.
I used to really like Adai too when I used to make a Madden team with all my custom players. He was one of my running backs.
Mm-hmm. And he was on that 06 team and everything, and I think he scored like the winning touchdown against the Patriots in that AFC Championship game that put him into the Super Bowl. Yeah.
5 minutes later.
I don't even know where I'm at on my list, but I'm just reading out here. Of course, quarterbacks, of course, Peyton Manning, but who I liked more than Peyton Manning, I have to go with Andrew Luck. I don't know, he was a goofy ass dude. He was, everybody liked him. He was, just all the different random things you hear about Andrew Luck, him using like Dora to explore references in the huddle and stuff, and he was had these plays and stuff like that. He was such a dork, but,
So I'm sure he was a grower. Right?
Probably.
Not a shower.
But, I mean, it's respectable, if anything, the way he played for only 7 years or something like that. I mean, he got hurt so many times, and he retired early, and it's like, oh, if he would have played longer, but it's like he probably could have been a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback, but he just, he knew there was a future beyond football, that he didn't want to just risk his life to play football. I mean, the dude had his spleen ruptured playing football. Couldn't protect him. It's pretty ironic that they bolstered the O-line after Andrew Luck decided to retire. So, I mean, but he's good. Every time you see him, he's not in the public light often, but he was like at the Olympics recently. You know, they showed him in the stands, like watching the gymnastics and stuff, and he seems to be laughing and smiling, and it's like he's loving life.
He's got a kid now.
Right, yeah. His wife was pregnant or something when he retired, so it's like he saw a future, outside of football. So it was like, all right. And anyway, moving on. It's like, I like Marvin Harrison enough as, because he's future Hall of Famer. Who I like more was Reggie Wayne. I'm assuming he's going to get in the Hall of Fame at some point. New Orleans own John Ehret Patriot, Reggie Wayne. I think I witnessed play, not that I would remember too well, I was younger, being on my dad's sideline at Bonneville. I'm pretty sure they played, I know they played Ed Reed with Destrehan, but I'm pretty sure they played against Reggie Wayne too. But that was some more favorite players. Defense, had to go, I couldn't pick one, I had to go with the combo of and Dwight Freeney, because they were like the same freaking player on both sides of that line.
He's in play free.
I mean, Dwight Freeney's about to go in the Hall of Fame, but Mathis should be in there one day. I mean, the dude played way longer for the Colts. He was captain. I mean, he made it. He was on the team when Andrew Luck was there. It was like he was like a double era Colts player. I mean, I don't know if he played for another team. I think he was on the Colts his whole career. But I mean, he made sacks a couple of times, I think. Finally, have to go with a couple of personal favorite players, not necessarily the best players ever, but got to be Dallas Clark, tight end. I mean, he had some good seasons, I guess, fantasy-wise. I mean, he was likable. I mean, after he retired, he acted in some minor roles in TV shows and shit like that, getting around. I guess I don't know what to say about that. Just, I don't know, for some reason, just like you're drawn to certain players.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I guess tight ends, fit the style of, player that I was when I played, things like that. And then favorite Colts player of all time would be Jeff Saturday. I played center in high school, and leader of he was not leader of he was captain of the Colts, but he was head of the NFL Players Association at one time, and he even went back and coached the team. So he was interim head coach.
Yep.
And filled in, and he never coached a day in his life, but it's he showed up to help lead the team and just be a part, do my part for this organization and stuff. So he's he's been on different ESPN shows and stuff like that. He was on NFL Primetime, I think, for a while, and he's he knows his shit. He was always kind of undersized too. He was only 6'2", whatever. He was undersized for another lineman. So there you go.
Good. A lot of categories there.
Different positions.
All right, so I'm gonna my two honorable. I have mentions. I'm lumping two together because let's say I guess we'll go with my fourth honorable mention. I'm going to go with Keenan Allen / Eric Allen. So those are two cornerbacks that I'm going to put together. Keenan Lewis, and Eric Allen. One thing I'll always remember, I liked Eric Allen when he came over from the Raiders. I don't think he quite lived up to the hype on the Saints that really came with him. But I liked the move, and I liked him as a Saint. Just didn't think he ended up being as good as he was on the Raiders and Eagles. One thing that always sticks out to me about Keenan Lewis was the day he had a concussion on the field, and he was basically refusing to leave the field, and the medical staff basically said hey, this is a rule, we have to take you off. But he was you're gonna have to drag me off the field, and I just love to see players with that kind of heart. He was my favorite player on the team at the time he was there. Second honorable mention, I'm gonna lump together two quarterbacks that really never panned out for the Saints. I just really liked them before they went to the Saints. One of them was actually pretty horrendous on the Saints, and the other one never really got a chance. But Heath Schuler / Joey Harrington. Joey Harrington's one of my favorite players to ever play the game. When he was on the Saints, he was nothing more than a third string quarterback. Never got the chance to really even compete for Drew's backup. Schuler was our starter for a year. I don't even think a 2. I think it was just 1 year before we gave up on him. But he rightfully so, he was pretty terrible.
Wasn't he a high draft pick that
Yeah.
we thought he would be good?
Well, he was drafted by the Redskins. He was a top pick by the Redskins, but he quickly fell off from there. We got him. There was a lot of hype around him, but he ended up being pretty bad for us.
He was a Heisman winner?
No, he was a Pro. I don't know if he won the
I
Heisman.
thought he won the Heisman then.
I don't know.
Tennessee boy, are you?
He was in Tennessee. Yeah. So I liked him when he was in college. I liked the draft. I liked when he was on the Redskins. Unfortunately, never panned out for the Saints. Joey Harrington, loved him as a Lion. Loved him at Oregon. Unfortunately, his career just never really panned out like it should have either. So now I'll get to kind of more recognizable players here. Third honorable mention, I'm going to go with a Saints legend, and I think it really kind of Ohio State boy. There's actually quite a few of Ohio State guys on this list. But Malcolm Jenkins, he was really, he was good for us. Left.
He's your 5th, or is he an honorable mention?
He's an honorable mention. Left us, played for the Eagles, probably had his best years on the Eagles, and then came back to us, and that's what I really appreciated was the
Saints
fact
didn't
that.
want to pay him. That's why.
And we paid Jarvis Bird, and that ended up working out wonders. But Jenkins, I appreciated the fact that after his really good years on the Eagles, that he came back to us and actually retired with us. So he comes in at my third honorable mention. And then my last honorable mention was actually Todd made a mention of his first original favorite Saints player was Eric Martin. Well, mine was a defensive player, back in the early 90s, and that was Ronaldo Turnbull. Not really a household name that many people probably remember, but he was a defensive end. He was pretty quick, pretty good pass rusher. So he comes in at my last honorable mention. 5, I'm going to go with big arm defensive tackle Leroy Glover. He actually had some really good years with us. Was a Pro Bowler for us. Left us and went to the Dallas Cowboys. Very intimidating looking individual. Humongous biceps. But really solid Saints player.
I looked up his.
Yeah.
He was unsung, kind of like better than people realize.
Yep. Number 4, a lot of. By the time he got to us, I still think he was decent with us, but his good years really came before he got here when he was with the New York Giants. But I'm going to go with tight end Jeremy Shockey. And again, a lot of the reason why I'm putting him high on my list is I was a big fan of him when he was on New York. He was our first year doing fantasy. He was our starting tight end, and it was his rookie year, and ended up taking him. And as a rookie tight end, you don't have that much expectation for him, but he ended up being a Pro Bowler that year, and was one of the driving forces that got us to the fantasy playoffs in our first year ever doing fantasy football. So I was a big fan of him throughout his whole career. I was really glad that he came here and won a Super Bowl with us. Number 3, current Saints player, longtime cornerback with us, Ohio State guy, Marshawn Lattimore. The guy, I still rank him as a top 10 cornerback in the league. I think he, puts up pretty consistent numbers every single year. As long as he's been in battles. Been battling.
Not a lot of moving at Patrick.
I don't Ohio State on this list.
Battles injuries off and on, but when he's on the field, I don't think there's any denying that he's a pretty damn good cornerback. Number 2, also Ohio State. Current guy, and I know this is really high to put him up on the list at this point, being that he's only going into his 3rd year, but he was my absolute favorite Ohio State player on the team a couple of years ago, and I was really excited when we drafted him, and that's Chris Olave. My favorite current Saints player, but he's among my favorite players in the league, even outside, even if I can include guys outside of the Saints. So he comes in at my number 2. I'm expecting him to have a long, prosperous career with the Saints.
As a sign of respect, he's one of the few Ohio State players that I actually like. Really do like the guy.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. Write that down.
Please do.
And then my last one, also an Ohio State guy, no longer with us, will be my all-time favorite Saints player, and that's going to be defensive end Will Smith. Again, up in the Ring of Honor now. Just played his whole career with us, and well, I thought he was pretty damn good his whole career with us.
And the guy that murdered him was out of jail.
Is he?
I think so.
Yeah. Well, anyway, miss watching him play. I believe that he would probably be a guy, who's heavily involved in the community now, much like we talked about Deuce, much like we talked about Drew Brees. I think he would be one of those guys who would still be heavily involved in the New Orleans community just because of playing his whole career with us. But unfortunately, his life was cut short, senseless crime. But Will Smith gets my number one as far as my favorite Saints player of all time.
You didn't mention Charlie Bundy.
That's true. I guess I could have gave a shout out to old Charlie.
Did he play at Ohio State?
No.
That's why he didn't make the list.
I won't say he was. I won't say he was Georgia. But,
He was. Was Marcus Colson on your list?
No.
No Eli Apple.
Number 40 back then.
Delvin, bro.
Oh, where's Elvin Bro?
Not on my list.
No Ohio State Michael Thomas or Eli Apple?
No.
Eli Apple.
Michael Thomas could have very easily been on there, other than the fact that how he ended here with us the past couple of years.
Eli Apple can eat more shit than Brandon Browner and Jarvis Bird.
I will never be an Eli Apple fan.
No one should be.
I wasn't really an Eli Apple fan when he was on Ohio State, and never thought he was that good.
I can't believe I owned a Jarvis Bird jersey after they signed him, thinking, oh yeah, he's our next big thing. And yeah, I look like a fool.
Well, pretty solid top fives across the board, fellas.
I liked it.
Some obvious ones that belong there, and some obscure ones, but I think that's what makes our podcast, makes the wheels on the wagon roll.
I like that. And on that note,
Wagons out.
Wagons out.